There's something almost Shakespearean about a man who has it all, only to implode under the weight of his own demons. Sean Combs, Puff Daddy, Puffy, P. Diddy, Diddy, Brother Love, whatever you want to call him, he was once a symbol of success and black excellence. He didn't just climb the ladder, he redesigned the whole damn staircase. From fashion to music, liquor, and TV shows, he wasn't just a businessman, he was the culture. But what happens when the man behind the empire is harboring a darkness deeper than his polished empire can contain? And what does it say about power, desire, and the human psyche when the pursuit of more money, more control, and more flesh pushes a man beyond moral return? What you're about to witness isn't just a fall from grace, it's a descent into obsession, secrecy, and alleged depravity through lawsuits, whispered rumors that now scream, and the haunting patterns of a man who seemed untouchable.
Oh, Lord. Y'all set this up real good. I'm clutching my pearls.
But before we dive deep into the darkest corners of Diddy's mind, don't forget to scoop up something to munch on at rrgsnacks.com, our online concession stand that has an assortment of Applewood smoked bacon jerky, freeze-dried goodies, and butter toffee peanuts. In November 2023, his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, filed a bombshell lawsuit alleging years of abuse, manipulation, and control. She claimed that shortly after signing to Bad Boy at the age of 19, Diddy began a calculated campaign of control. He allegedly coerced her into a life of substances, violence, and non-consensual acts with male escorts, all while he watched and sometimes filmed the encounters. The lawsuit was quickly settled, but the damage had already been done. The case brought up a ton of questions, such as, why would a man sitting on $1 billion, a legacy, and global influence risk it all? This is where the psychology begins to unravel. Power doesn't corrupt, it reveals, and in some cases, it indulges. For men like Diddy, who have mastered the art of influence, the world becomes a stage where impulse meets invincibility. According to Dr. Durvasula, a licensed clinical psychologist, people who rise to high levels of fame and power often display traits of narcissism and sociopathy. They may have impaired empathy and use others to fulfill their own needs. But why is this so common in men like Diddy? Because power, especially unchecked power, becomes an accelerant. It doesn't create these traits, it exposes and amplifies them. When a person is constantly praised, catered to, and protected by their status, they begin to live in what psychologists call a narcissistic bubble. It's a psychological echo chamber where the rules don't apply and no one ever says no. Over time, this alters their perception of reality. They no longer see people as individuals with rights, feelings, and autonomy. They see them as tools, props, and means to an end. Diddy's behavior with Cassie lines up disturbingly well with this pathology. According to court filings, he allegedly isolated her, controlled her every move, and dictated not just her professional life, but her body. He orchestrated a world in which her consent became irrelevant and her identity was broken down until she functioned more like an object than a partner. Their relationship wasn't about lust, it was about domination. Dr. Durvasula explains that narcissists and sociopaths often engage in something called narcissistic supply, a constant need to feed their self-worth by using others to reflect back their power. When that supply feels threatened by a partner gaining independence, questioning their authority, or choosing to leave, the narcissist doesn't just feel hurt, they feel annihilated. And that's when the mask slips. In the context of the allegations, Diddy didn't simply want Cassie to love him. He allegedly wanted to own her. For someone with narcissistic or sociopathic tendencies, control is the only way to feel secure. If you're not bending to them, you're a threat, and threats must be silenced, broken, or erased. And here's where it gets even darker. Diddy's father, Melvin Combs, was killed when Diddy was 3 years old. He was raised by a single mother in Harlem and often spoke about the violence and chaos around him. It's possible that Diddy learned early on that vulnerability equals danger. So instead instead of processing pain, he may have replaced it with dominance. It brings forth the twisted logic of, if I can control everyone around me, no one can ever hurt me again. It also explains the alleged obsession with filming intimate acts. In Diddy's case, the recordings weren't about pleasure. They were about surveillance, proof, and leverage. A 2016 study published in the Journal of Interpersonal Violence found that men who demonstrate compulsive sexual behavior in tandem with violent tendencies often use humiliation and surveillance as forms of psychological abuse. Now, we're not going to diagnose Diddy as a narcissist.
Oh, we not? Are you sure about that? Are you sure? You sure, girl?
However, a true narcissist doesn't just dominate in the moment. They collect trophies of that dominance. It's not about the act. It's about the evidence of control. That's how warped this mindset becomes. And when surrounded by enablers like lawyers, staff, fans, and friends who look the other way, there are no natural consequences, so the behavior escalates. The scariest part of it all is that it happens gradually. People like this don't walk into the room as monsters. They present themselves as mentors, as lovers, as protectors. The abuse begins not with violence, but with flattery and love bombing. Once you're in their orbit, leaving becomes the most dangerous move you can make, because you're no longer just a person to them. You're a possession trying to escape. And to the disordered mind, that's a betrayal punishable by war. So when Dr. Durvasula says high-powered figures often show signs of narcissism or sociopathy, she's not just making an observation. She's sounding an alarm. Because when you combine power, money, and untreated trauma, you don't get a mogul, you get a ticking time bomb. In Diddy's case, the accusations suggest a man whose sense of reality had warped. The line between pleasure and cruelty, intimacy and ownership became blurred. The lavish parties, the secret cameras, the alleged substance-fueled orgies, they weren't just acts of indulgence. They were rituals of control. And Cassie was just a prop in a theater of dominance. Allegations from others began surfacing. Some hinted at coercion, others at physical violence. Even people within his circle began pulling back. Multiple former employees and collaborators described an atmosphere of fear around him, a sense that his charm could turn dark without warning. Yet he maintained a public persona of generosity, of mentorship, and Black excellence. Through lawyers, he has maintained his innocence in all criminal matters, framing the lawsuit as a shakedown and the media as sensationalists. But that defense collapses under the weight of pattern. One allegation can be questioned, but when the allegations stack, when they mirror each other in tone and detail, the denial starts to sound like the final echo of a man whose world is closing in. We often ask if money changes people, but maybe it just reveals who they were without consequences. When there's no one around to say no, the darkest parts of the psyche flourish. Without the friction of accountability or consequence, the entitlement goes unchecked. From a psychological standpoint, this is the danger of power without regulation. Money creates a world where reality bends to the individual. Moral licensing is a psychological pattern in which individuals who believe they've done enough good or who see themselves as exceptional begin to justify unethical behavior. In their mind, their success gives them the right to express themselves in any way. So when their circle is built on silence, fear, or greed, the worst parts of the psyche aren't just allowed, they're encouraged. The monster isn't born from money. It's just finally rich enough to come out and play. The creepiest part of all of this is that it hid in plain sight. The lavishness, the mystery, the freak-offs. It was branded as Diddy just enjoying the nightlife, but maybe it was always something darker, something monstrous wrapped in silk sheets. Yet, even monsters are human, and maybe that's what makes this so chilling. Diddy is not some faceless villain. He's a man, one who was once a boy who lost his father, a boy who feared being powerless, a boy who decided that if he couldn't be safe, he would be feared. That fear has now turned inward. The very machine he built of control, secrecy, and dominance is now eating him alive. And maybe that's justice, or maybe it's just another tragedy in a long line of men who couldn't stop chasing more. What we're witnessing is not just a fall from grace, it's a psychological unraveling, a man consumed by the very appetite that once made him great. And as the lawsuits pile up and the victims finally step out of the shadows, one thing becomes disturbingly clear. The most dangerous monsters don't lurk in the dark. They stand in designer suits, hand out champagne, and whisper sweet nothings while orchestrating nightmares.